Hello and welcome back to the June 1st podcast. I am Ethan Moriarty.
And I am Connor Moriarty, and we are so back with this podcast.
It has been a hot minute, that is for sure. It's crazy to think, we've started this thing probably about 3 years ago. It's had a bunch of different variations, mostly as like an interview type podcast with mostly just myself, but I wanted to bring Connor back into the fold more, and I figured this would just be a great opportunity just to, get to catch up brother on brother, especially since we don't live with each other anymore. We both have fled the nest, if you will.
Yeah, you're in New York City, or I should say just outside New York City.
Greater New York City. I mean,
Yeah,
Manhattan is, I mean, I'm closer to New York City than Staten Island is, so, and that's apparently New York City, so, which is crazy to think about, because it's like, honestly, how the heck did Staten Island get annexed to be New York is beyond me, but I'm pretty sure there's a CPG Grey video about it, or something like
there
that,
is.
right?
I know, or it's debunking the story that as to how Staten Island came to be.
Yeah, exactly. But the
Uh,
fact if that's a New York City bureau, I'm literally staring at Manhattan from my apartment window, then I think it's safe to say that I'm Greater New York.
and I can't see Boston on my window, but apparently I'm Greater Boston.
Yeah, Greater Boston, north of. I mean, you're in that or 495 ring that kind of goes around. So,
Yeah.
right.
I
Yeah.
mean, all of Massachusetts is Boston to people who aren't in the States, so
Exactly. Well, I mean, a couple of Western Massachusetts boys were, I mean, in some ways, it's almost closer to get, you're easier to get to New York City than it is to go Boston sometimes. I mean, yeah, it's a straight shot on 90 for us, but nonetheless, I mean, the traffic getting into, well, I guess it's, getting into either Boston or New York is not necessarily the easiest thing, but
yeah.
nonetheless, we're far apart. Connor, how have you been, man? I mean, it's like I haven't really gotten to talk to you in a couple of weeks. It's been a while since I've seen you.
Yeah, I've been plugging away at my 9 to 5 or 8 to 5 with my 980 schedule. I do love the 980 schedule. That means I have a long weekend every other weekend. It's super underrated.
Yeah, that's for
And
sure.
if you can get that with your work, I highly recommend it.
Yeah, that's what I used to have before I decided to jump ship and do all this June 1st stuff. But y Connor, I'm pretty sure didn't you just have COVID or something? You were
Yes,
sick. I
I did.
remember. Yeah, mom was
I
telling me
was
about
on
that.
work travel, and the person next to me, I was on the aisle seat. The person on the window seat was hacking away, and I was just thinking, oh man, if this guy has COVID, I'm definitely done for. And sure enough, I was done for.
Well, that's the thing with traveling. It's like it's so I was gonna say it's so hard to stay healthy, but I guess it's more the fact it's so easy to get sick. You're in a giant confined tube for multiple hours, especially when you're on a cross continental flight. So
Yeah.
it's crazy to think about, but I mean, just the concept of being in a tube with like 200 other people in the air at 35,000 feet or whatever.
Yeah, that's why I want to take the train from now on. It's still a tube, but it's a larger tube.
Yeah, exactly. You can distance yourself. You're not confined to one seat, I guess.
Yeah.
Um, Nonetheless, it's good to hear from you. It's good to be back at doing this. And I guess we can kind of start on how we kind of plan to do this podcast. I think we already hinted at it earlier, but we're going to try to do this as a bi-weekly type thing to start. And it's going to take on a little bit different format. This podcast has kind of gone through a couple different iterations, none of them super consistent. I mean, the most consistent was when it first started and it was very interview based format, but then I took a lot of time to focus on the YouTube side of things and the podcast kind of took a back seat. And now we're at the point where I am doing the June 1st stuff at a full time capacity. So it felt like the right time to revive it again. And there's a larger audience now of June 1st. And I don't know if I guess they want to hear us yap about weather for a little bit, then more power to them, right?
Yeah. Let's talk about, I guess, some weather.
Yeah. That is to say, I will preface too that we're not getting rid of interviews. There will be interviews eventually again on the podcast. But in the meantime, it's going to be mostly Connor and I, and we're going to be talking about weather stories. And boy, do we have some weather stories from the past couple of weeks that are worth talking about. Uh, I think we just dive right into Hurricane Helene, which has been honestly probably one of the most controversial, like
Weather events.
conspiratorial weather events that I can remember in some time. Just kind of going over some of the current stats of the hurricane. There were, as of the recording of this podcast, obviously this is still a ongoing current event in some ways. 252 fatalities, 93 still considered missing, and a damage estimate of over 45 billion, which I imagine that number is going to continue to rise. But obviously, if you're a fan of the main channel, then I was down there for Hurricane Helene, and I'll talk about that a little bit. But Connor, I want to kind of get some of your thoughts on what was kind of the main aspects of Helene that kind of either surprised you, or just hurricanes in general, man. It's like, I feel like a lot of them, they're all kind of similar in a sense, but each one kind of takes on their own characteristics, it seems.
Yeah, kinda. It's definitely the inland impacts for this hurricane as to what makes it especially unique. Where it hit inland, how strong it was while it was still inland, and what it particularly did is it's not really just a unique thing to the hurricane, it's probably going to define the hurricane. It wiped Appalachian towns like off the map, and that is unheard of in tolds of like hurricanes and what they do. It was catastrophic to say the least, and its landfall was, it was a Cat 4 at landfall if I remember correctly,
Yeah,
but
it was.
people aren't really going to remember it for that. The people are going to remember it for what it did, yeah, in the Appalachians. Kind
Yeah.
of similar to Ida. It had a decent landfall, but when it turned inland, it produced a wide tornado outbreak in the Northeast.
And flash
So,
flooding.
yes, and
People,
flash flooding.
yeah, the flash flooding event of Ida was honestly kind of the main story. Here in Greater New York City, there was, I believe, over 60 fatalities associated with the excessive rainfall, and that's something that I think goes so unappreciated when it comes to hurricanes. Think back at some of the hurricanes going back a few years. In the Northeast, we're particularly I don't want to say used to it, but there have been a number of storms in recent memory that have caused excessive rainfall events in at least northern Appalachia. I can't speak to, I don't know too much about southern Appalachia excessive rain event history from hurricanes, but I think of like Floyd in 99. You think of Irene in 2011. You think of, I guess, Ida, if you want to even lump it into that category too. There's been a number of storms that have caused these great excessive rainfall events. And, we've gotten really good at forecasting them. The Weather Prediction Center had a high risk for excessive rainfall over that southern Appalachia region, I should say. But how do you really communicate that threat? It's not as flashy as storm surge or excessive wind, right? It's such a complicated issue.
Yeah, it's also very complex. You can take X amount of inches in rainfall and have it dump somewhere, and it'll be no problem. But if you do it in the mountains, it's gonna be an extreme event, just on how mountains work and channel rainfall towards valleys where people are settled. So there's not really a defined metric similar to, or kind of unlike winds where 150 miles per hour is extremely bad and people can take it as such.
Yeah,
But I
it's like
guess
I
having
think
like 6 inches of rainfall doesn't really communicate something.
it's hard to really conceptualize what that actually means. Because that's not something like 150 mile per hour winds. People have seen, you know, hurricane footage before or whatever. A classic shot of a roof blown off a building or whatever. But at the same time, too, it's like, how the heck do you communicate that threat of there being 6 inches of rainfall? And in a lot of cases, there were instances well above that in Appalachia. And the crazy thing is, too, is like, if you think about it from like kind of like a physics standpoint, if you're putting all this water on the top of a mountain, right? and you just think about it in terms of like potential energy, you put like a little bit of water. I mean, obviously, I guess a lot of water starting at the top of the mountain. And as you go down in elevation, you're compounding more water plus that increased velocity from turning that potential energy with height into kinetic energy down the slope. And then eventually, like, I mean, if you think about it in terms of like, if you have water that's moving at 100 miles per hour versus wind moving at 100 miles per hour, water's what? Like 800 times more dense than air? Something like that?
Yeah, if not more.
Exactly. So it's like the amount of the amount of energy and mass that's being moved at such a high velocity, it's going to be so destructive. So, and like, I mean, just think of the erosion, right? Alone. And it's like we're seeing entire roadways that are built along these kind of little channels and valleys that have been carved over time by water just get absolutely eviscerated. It's like the power of water is something that is, honestly, I think is probably one of the most destructive forces of nature. I think, if I'm not mistaken, floods are the deadliest natural disaster across human history.
I can look it up right now, but there's been a couple floods in China that have death tolls in the millions.
Yeah, exactly. And in terms of naturally induced, well, I guess, I mean,
Yeah.
I guess it doesn't even have to be naturally induced. I mean, just if we're just talking about the force of water, you know, if you think of like, you know, during like Japan's invasion of China in the 30s, and like, weren't they just like blowing up dams and just like flooding entire cities?
Yep.
So, I mean, water is just something that is not to be messed with. And that's why they say, like, when, you know, turn around, don't drown, obviously, when you're, you know, driving through flooded roadways and stuff like that. But if you're in like a swift moving current that's above your ankles, like that can easily knock most people over. Like, and once you get up to your knees, then forget about it.
You're being carried.
Yeah, exactly. You know, that takes me back to, remember when we went whitewater rafting in northern Maine?
Yes.
Maybe you should tell the story of us getting dumped into the Penobscot.
You can tell it. Go ahead.
All right. Well, we were rafting in northern Maine. This is when we were in the Scouts, and this was like a trip up to Acadia, but we took a interior detour to go whitewater rafting. And we went down one of these rapids, and the way the river was set up, there was like a way you could get back up and hit the rapid again. So what we did is like we went to the shore and like got the raft back up, and then we were able to do the rapid again. And that second time we hit the rapid, we hit it like the wrong way, and it completely flipped us out of the raft, and everyone got dumped out. And granted, what was it, like July that we were on this trip? The water's still freezing. It's still like, you know, snow runoff at this point, even in Maine. And you pop out of the water, and one of the things they tell you is not to put your feet down. You put your feet up. Because if you try to stand up and your leg gets caught, ultimately, if you get like pushed down by the current and your leg is stuck, it's your best case scenario is that your leg is going to snap, right? Like, you hope your leg breaks in order to free you from drowning. Otherwise, you're just going to be pinned underwater because the current, you're not getting back up with that current running over you. So ultimately, we get dumped. I remember from my perspective, I come up out of the water, and I mean, it could have been more than 3 seconds, if that, since I went in the water. I pulled I remember being under the raft and having to like push myself to one side. And by the time like my head popped back up again, I was like 50 yards away from the raft.
Yep, that was me too.
Yeah, exactly. So, and then, I mean, eventually we all got back on and continued the trip or whatever. But like, I think that was like one of the instances that really made me appreciate the power of moving water. At least in that context. I had another rip current story, but that's
rip current story.
I mean, the ocean we already know the ocean's powerful, but just moving water in general, that I feel like that whitewater rafting story is kind of like the perfect example to kind of illustrate, and taught me from a I guess younger age. I was 15 or 16 at the time, and that moving water is something that should never be messed with. And I just wonder if people have never really had that type of experience in order to really conceptualize how strong water actually is. Because everyone, like, I mean, a lot of people learn how to swim and stuff like that, but you can't swim in currents like that.
Yeah, when the water's moving, you can't really get to somewhere. You just have to slow yourself down for something to come to you, or speed up so you can get to it sooner.
Yeah, you're with the motion of the, I was going to say the motion of the ocean, but I guess in this
Motion
case,
of the river.
yeah, river, or in this case, a extremely engorged stream running down a mountain in the case of lower Appalachia. I mean, some of the, and kind of getting into this a little deeper, the crazy thing about this event too is, I mean, the politicalization of a disaster from both aspects, from, the right and the left, of like everyone pointing fingers and like all this stuff and all this like crazy like conspiratorial stuff, like the amount of stuff on the internet around like hurricanes gets bonkers. It's funny, I made a video about this like kind of hurricane hype casting, and a lot of people, like, I was getting like torched in the comments of that video because people, I was talking about hype casting because I said it, like, I wasn't
You're
saying
posting deterministic models, right?
yeah, like
Or
people,
I shouldn't say you, but people were.
yeah, the thing was, is my issue was that if people that aren't qualified to talk about disasters like that are ultimately disseminating deterministic model outputs and kind of throwing off the message and kind of clogging the veins of proper article or proper information dissemination. Like, you should be getting like your information from like the National Hurricane Center, not some person on TikTok that's just posting a GFS run. Especially when things like evacuations and stuff are important. Like, why evacuate based off of some TikTok model output that has it 100 miles in the other direction? Like, it just, like, that's kind of what I'm getting at, is like, you're clogging the veins of proper information dissemination. That's kind of what I was getting at. But everybody like thought I was just directly talking about like hurricane forecasting and stuff. So when Helene made ashore, people were like, "Oh, this guy looks stupid now," and I was like, "That's not the point I was making in the video. Did you just read my title?" Of course, the title is going to be a little bit of clickbait. That's how YouTube works. But I don't know. Connor, what are your thoughts? Like, Connor, what are some of the things that you saw with some of the like information and, or I hate the term misinformation. It's thrown around so much now, but
yeah.
What were some of the things that you were seeing online when it comes to Helene?
I mean, I'm very concentrated on the weather space. I'm not really concentrated on outside of the weather space. So, when I see a deterministic model saying that it's going to be a sub 900 millibar storm, I'm just be like, oh, that's funny, and then just move on. But I think we need to figure out how to bridge the gap between posting a deterministic model for the funnies in internal weather space and having that leak to the outside world, who somebody doesn't know that this is a joke.
Yeah.
And we're kind of just pointing fun, and people actually think, oh my goodness, it's going to be a storm of the century, and it's going to my place.
Yeah.
Where in actuality, it's going to be still a major landfall, but it's going to be somewhere else, and ultimately not a storm of the century, but
yeah,
still very strong.
Definitely. And I think a lot of it too is like, I mean, granted, the fact that we have models and stuff like this publicly available for free is incredible. But at the same time too, it's like you can just, like, anyone can open up, the College of DuPage model viewer and just start playing around with it. And like, this could be this person's first time of ever opening a model viewer. And, if they have a sizable TikTok following or whatever, they can just, kind of have these delusions of, being the source of information or whatever. Like, you see a lot of these, like, kind of like, do I say like fake news counts that, like, I would say are not remotely qualified. I mean, granted, there's like weather YouTubers and stuff that technically don't have meteorological degrees, but they've been entrenched in the weather world long enough that they kind of have a reasonable understanding of things. I mean, granted,
Yeah, they have large amounts of experience.
I'm an engineer. Like, I didn't take former meteorological training, but at the same time too, I've been invested in weather my entire life and have done stuff with it in a professional sense here and there, just not as a proper, labeled forecaster. So I always make sure that I preface that, like, kind of the information that I'm getting is from official sources and stuff like that. So I don't know. It's just crazy. And I think the thing is too, is, we're so close to like the election, for example, too, where it's just driven this insane politicalization of,
Yeah.
oh, FEMA's not here. Oh, FEMA's turning people away. But like in reality, that's not the case. And then you get the other side that's like saying like, oh, we're doing all these things, but they're like kind of not going there or whatever. Like, it's just insane. Like, why do these poor people have to be political pawns? I guess that's just the nature of any political, squabble, if you will.
Anger is what gets around the fastest. So you're gonna, if somebody posts a lie that is designed to make you angry, then it's gonna spread. And pointing fingers and saying that person who lied is the biggest problem is also going to attract a lot of attention and anger, and they're pitted against each other instead of actually solving the problem.
Exactly. Yeah. It's kind of a weird dystopian reality that we're sometimes looking at, it seems. Kind of moving away from the lower Appalachia impacts. I mean, granted, I don't want to like just like move along from it. Obviously, we know how impactful it was. Ultimately, I ended up chasing this storm. This is my first major hurricane that I've ever chased. And it was an experience. Don't get me wrong. I had some experience with a couple tropical storms and one Cat 1 up this way in the Northeast with landfalls, along Long Island and the Cape Cod and those types of places. But, to go down to Florida along the Gulf Coast was definitely an experience to experience a major hurricane. Would you ever want to experience a major hurricane?
Maybe, but I definitely don't want to do it by myself. I want to go with somebody who has experience documenting a lot of hurricanes. We know a few people who do this a lot,
Yeah.
and I feel definitely comfortable going with them who have gone to all around Florida and found spots and know what to do when you're in the eye wall of a Cat 4 or a Cat 5.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, fortunately, what I did before I, departed and went south was I talked to a couple of people, Gabe Cox and Max Olson being the main two that I kind of consulted with to kind of get a better understanding of what I was getting myself into. And I was also, I wrote out the eye wall with Nick Stewart, who, is a meteorologist, has been through a number of hurricanes. So, and, is native to Florida. So it was good to, kind of, have that wealth of knowledge tapped into, and it definitely paid off. I had extra gas with me and, a large supply of water and food, those types of things in order to make sure that I was, fully prepared and self-sufficient, because last thing I wanted to do was tax local resources. The most interesting thing about intercepting Helene, granted, I probably could have gotten more the eastern eye wall. I was more in the northern eye wall, so the winds were coming more out of the due east, and then, well, at first kind of was more the western eye wall, but then became more the northern eye wall. So it was kind of like more of like we were getting more of a northerly component and then like an easterly component. Nonetheless, some still pretty strong gusts at the end of the day. And then when we were trying to get into the eye is when we were on Interstate 10 and ultimately kind of got to this narrow choke point where all of these soft pines came down across the highway and we had to cut our way out of the highway. And, I got a lot of heat in the comments of that chasing video with, calling me like stupid and why would you ever chase a hurricane? And I don't think people realize how many people actually chase hurricanes. And granted, yes, like what I did with the whole highway thing was probably not the smartest move. But at the same time too, it wasn't like a completely blind decision. I had driven on I-10 earlier and saw that the trees were cut really far back. It was just this literal one section of highway where that there were trees in the middle between the two lanes that really caused an issue. So ultimately, yeah, it was still kind of silly, but I mean, you gotta do what you can to get into the eye, right? So, it was a calculated measure, and ultimately everything worked out in the end, but it wasn't probably the smartest. Should have been scouted out probably a little bit more, I feel like.
Yeah. But I guess, yeah, little miscalculations happen all the time.
Yeah,
It's
definitely.
when you do that more on a grander scale, and you make mistakes that compound mistakes on where things go wrong. It's kind of like tornado chasing. One mistake isn't going to get you in too much trouble usually,
Hmm.
but if you make mistake upon mistake upon mistake.
Yeah, that's when things. Yeah, and it's like, I got that experience out of the way. It's a learning lesson, and that part of Florida too is just a brutal area to intercept your first major hurricane with all the pines and stuff. There's not many coastal locations or stuff like that. Whereas if you're
Yeah.
more, down towards like Tampa and stuff like that, it's like much more populated. You can find a parking garage or wherever the eye wall is gonna be. So you can kind of, and you're not having to worry about trees. Or anything like that as such. So um, it was an intense experience. Glad I did it. I decided not to go down from Milton. I could have, but ultimately it was just like if I was gonna do it again, I was gonna fly down there and meet up with people. But I was just not about going on another like 24-hour driving excursion back up and down I-95. I was pretty much driven out at that point, at least for hurricane chasing. So that was an experience nonetheless. And I guess that kind of segues now into Hurricane Milton, which, of course, after having Hurricane Helene, now we go into Milton. Connor, do you want to read off some of the stats behind the hurricane so far?
Yeah, I guess I shall. So as of recording right now, we have 33 fatalities. 6 people are still unaccounted for, and as of recording, we have at least $300 billion in damage.
30 billion.
So 30. I apologize.
Imagine if it was 300 billion. It just wiped
Yeah.
Florida off the map.
Okay,
Well,
there goes Tampa Bay.
well, so many people thought that Florida was about to get wiped off the map
Oh
with
yeah.
Milton.
I mean, forecast models pinned it right square into the Tampa metro,
Well,
and
yeah,
thankfully it maneuvered just like a few miles southward and had that eastern, or I should say northern eye wall that's going due east
right.
that basically prevented Tampa from taking a brunt of the storm surge, and just had, was it Venice Beach?
Yeah. Um.
And yeah,
Well, and then that northern eye wall was sucking all the water out of Tampa Bay. Do you see the
exactly.
water
So
retreating, which is crazy?
yeah,
Also, too, it's like the thing was with Milton, it seemed like everybody was so fixated at how it was in the Gulf, like the fact that it just became this absolute buzzsaw in the Gulf of Mexico. But at the same time, too,
yes,
it was always forecasted to downtrend. It was going to hit shear. It was going to hit drier air loft. So it wasn't going to be a Cat 5 at landfall. But I think, once again, kind of coming back around to the fact that people that shouldn't be talking about weather are making TikToks and stuff about it. Ultimately, we're like, oh, this is like a, once again, doomsday scenario type thing.
yep. And then we ran into more conspiracy theories where, God, I don't even want to mention.
Harp.
Yeah, that. I mean, people thinking that the government is modifying this weather phenomenon that's multi miles wide and takes up the energy of nuclear bombs all like in a second.
Yeah,
I should say
exactly.
second.
I think the biggest thing that like that kind of disproves all that is I just don't think people realize how much energy is required to, or how much energy a hurricane has. It is like beyond human comprehension how much energy a hurricane possesses. As you said, I think an average, like if you were to take like a category 2 hurricane, per day, it's like 250 Tsar bombas worth of nuclear detonations or whatever.
It's just total energy.
Yeah, exactly. Its energy is off the charts. And don't get me wrong, cloud seeding is a thing. Like that you do it in the Middle East to get like rain and stuff, right? They use like the silver iodine or whatever. But there's no
Yeah, like it's supposed to.
chance that we could do it at the scale needed to do a hurricane. Like they're making a cloud. Like
Yeah, in some rain. Well, like my goodness, this is
a
like
power
orders
shower.
upon orders upon orders of magnitude lower.
Yeah, it's like how many Olympic swimming pools does a hurricane possess? I don't know, but I would like to think that it would be a metric bleep ton, if you will. Oh man, yeah. So yeah, it's like the weather modification theories. I think. Do you think a lot of that just comes down to like STEM illiteracy?
Yeah, it's definitely a combination of that, and also just a general combination of just fear.
Yeah, that
I
too.
mean, this is a big going on. People are kind of, no, I shouldn't say scared, but kind of disillusioned with like our institutions these days,
Yeah, it's just
and it's
easier
definitely
to kind of point to that instead of like kind of just accepting. Yeah, and it's like, I mean, obviously we cannot say that Milton was caused by climate or any hurricane for that matter was caused by
yeah,
climate change. Like that's inappropriate to say and incorrect to
yeah.
say. However, water is warmer. This is like a proven fact
There's
time and
more
time again.
energy added to the
Yeah,
mix.
exactly. And when you think about it too, if your ambient air temperature increases, your water content is able to increase. So, these are things that need to be considered when we're talking about a warming climate. And I think it's so difficult to talk about these things because then you get the other side, right? You get like the New York Times or whatever, like you get like kind of like the more left side of the equation where the those agencies or news agencies or whatever are pinning this squarely on climate change. And it's like that doesn't do us any good either in terms of like educating people, in terms of like trying to really get the point across of what is actually happening, if you will. Like what the ramifications of climate change really are, and that the fact that this is a long scale thing that we can't possibly pin one weather event on, if that makes
Yeah,
sense. I don't know. It's just such a tough thing to communicate. And like you said, I think it's just a lot of, not to the fault of the people, but there's just a lot of ignorance, right?
yeah. It's easier to, oh yeah, it's easier to point the finger than it is to learn natural events and accept. That's a particularly hard one to accept that then the natural processes are at work here.
Yeah, definitely. Kind of looking at Milton itself a bit, I mean, that rapid intensification was one of the most incredible things to witness over the course of that day. Watching Milton go from a 1 to a 5 in what, like less than 18 hours or something like that.
Yeah, I I think only the real other similar event to this is Otis in recent memory.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good one. Or even I don't know any of the typhoon. I feel like the typhoons they're usually slow growers, but those typhoons. I mean, everyone looks at like Tip, but that's like the classic like mega
Yeah,
death typhoon slash hurricane cyclone, whatever you want to call it, tropical system. But I mean, there's this one satellite loop from um, is it Cira, CIRA? That the satellite imagery people,
yeah.
that
I'm
take like
trying
the
to
go that
remember.
process that goes imagery. Anyway,
Yeah,
they had this loop of Milton at peak intensity, and you're just like if you just watch the eye, the thing's just spinning
yeah.
like
Charming.
crazy, and then you have the uh absolute buzzsaw just kind of like circling around it, like that buzzsaw hurricane look that just looks mean and powerful. Granted, Milton was a pretty, I think, on the smaller side of storms, it was like, pretty tight and compact. But the thing that really impressed me, did you watch like the gravity waves emanating
Yes.
out?
Just the pressure differentials, just for each like kind of breath it took, it just expanded out.
Yeah, I think those gravity waves are like particularly interesting. Well, especially like kind of watching them just ripple out, because it literally is like watching like throwing a rock in a puddle, if you will, but it's just rippling through a hurricane, and it's like just goes to show like how incredible the atmosphere can be.
Yeah.
It's really hard to imagine.
There's so much of it.
Yeah, right. Um, yeah, Milton was definitely a beast to be obviously respected, but also admired. I mean, we can appreciate something like that when, especially when it's like out in the Gulf and it's not, impacting people at the time. You can kind of appreciate the beauty and raw power of a storm of that magnitude. And that's something like, I mean, it's like, I know that this thing's going to hit Florida. There are going to be extreme ramifications from it. And the other thing too with Milton that's worth talking about, that tornado outbreak associated with it was pretty
Yes.
pretty intense.
I mean, they had like the record number in NWS Miami
Of tornado warnings?
Yeah,
Something like
tornado
that?
warnings issued.
In a day?
Yeah,
Just like
not even a day, like in hours.
wow. That's insane.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean,
like, or I should say like half a day.
dude,
Half a
shout
day
out
there
to
was.
the National Weather Service meteorologists that have to like, if they're getting like impacted by a hurricane, they just kind of have to like camp out at their office for like however many hours throughout the landfall, and they're just like
Well, I mean
drawing up warning boxes and stuff.
the National Hurricane Center. It's like a concrete bunker.
I know. I
Have
would love
you
to
ever
get to
seen
tour
pictures
it
of it? It's
someday.
like an actual bunker.
Yeah, no, I've seen. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'd love to check it out one day. But I feel like I feel Eastern Florida has dodged a couple of bullets over the years, like at least in recent years. I mean, you can
Yeah.
Andrew in 1992. That's probably the most recent like extreme landfalling East Coast Florida hurricane. But like you think about like Dorian a couple years ago, or even was it Matthew? I wanted to say Michael, but that was Panama City. Matthew
Yeah.
was the one that like skirted the coast, right? 2016, was that? Does that sound about right?
Trying to remember.
They all blur together all the I ones blur together for me. I always forget like which year. Like I know their names. Like I know Ian, Ida, Irma. Yeah, but it's like the years kind of get confusing. Like let's see. Irma was 2017, right?
Yeah.
Ida was 2021, and then Ian was 2022. Adalia was 2023.
Yes.
Dude, I thought
That's
Helene was
it.
going to be the ice storm, so like I thought that was going to happen because there was that disturbance out in the Atlantic, and I was like, of course the Gulf storm's going to get the eye, and then it didn't. Helene matured first, but I forgot what even the I name was for this year.
Isaac?
No, Hurricane Isaac is retired, is it not?
No, I thought it was Isaac.
Oh, maybe it was. What am I thinking? Dude, it's like trying to keep track of like your friends' names or something, or your friends of friends' names. Like when you meet up for the first time and it's like you meet them and then you forget their name like 2 minutes later. It's a really good trick actually for that. When you meet someone for the first time and they say their name, instantly picture someone you know already with that name. And then you associate it like that. I found that works for me the best when I'm meeting a bunch of people for the first time. Like I'll repeat it. Like I'll be like, "Hi, Ethan," and then they say their name, and then I'll repeat their name, and then I think in my head someone that already has that name. And if it's an obscure name that I don't already have someone cataloged in my head with, then oh well, too bad. I guess I'm forgetting their name. Unless if it's being said over and over again. My goldfish brain sometimes. I don't know. Do you have that issue?
A little bit, yeah. I am historically bad with names.
Yeah. Numbers, though. Numbers we got a pretty solid handle on, I feel like.
Yeah.
Oh,
How about we
jeez.
just give every person a number? No.
Yeah. Um, I think that's
But it was
probably...
Isaac.
It was Isaac?
Yes.
Okay. I feel like... And it's like... The Hurricane Center's like... Probably like, we gotta stop with the I names being crazy. It's like... That's like... How many I's are there, really? Like, how many I names are there? I feel like I don't know many people with the letter I in their name. Or the I leading off their name. Right? It's not a super common beginning letter of
Yeah,
someone's
it's really
name.
just Isaac and Ian. It's the only two
Well,
I
those are like
really
two
know.
guy names. I think like Isabella is
Yeah.
probably like the only like girl's name that's pretty common nowadays. That's
Mhm.
But even so, I don't know too many of those. Irene.
But yeah,
I feel like
Irene.
it's an older name. I feel like our grandmother's named Irene.
Yeah.
Oh, jeez. I feel like that's a good amount that we've talked about hurricanes. Something, I guess, completely different, but happened nonetheless this past week was the Aurora event on last Thursday.
Yes.
Did you get a chance to see it?
I barely did. I got one bad picture because it was cloudy and there was a lot of light pollution near Boston.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, even though I mean that first when the first sun first set, there was that huge there was like a substorm that hit right when the sun set, and like it wasn't even total darkness yet, and like I was driving on the highway and I could
could
see
see it?
it due west, like into the setting sun. Like, well, the sun had already dipped below the horizon, but I could see it while the sky was still
In the
like,
twilight.
yeah, that twilight blue kind of. And there were people seeing it over Manhattan, like
Yeah.
that substorm arc. But ultimately, the big substorm that I saw was around like 10:30 or something like that. That was the one that really knocked my socks off, and it was good. It was nice. It made up for May 10th, which happened. Obviously, that was the big G5 storm that happened. We had a lot of clouds that I was kind of battling with. It took me a while to kind of find a spot that was not so impacted by the clouds, but even so, there were still quite a few clouds in my shots, and it kind of, I mean, it made for a cool time lapse actually from a photography standpoint, but ultimately, it definitely made things a little bit more difficult. But this night was perfectly clear, and I was just basking in it, kind of seeing it from one end of the horizon to the other from the vantage point that I had.
Yeah. I wish I could get a view like that, but what's it? I mean, it was work the next day for me. I had to go to bed
Yeah,
when it was 10:30.
yeah,
And when that substorm hit when it was sunsetting, I was making food. So I was definitely I had life a little bit in the way, but I was able to actually see it a little bit with my naked eye, and I got one picture.
that's
But
fair. It's funny. It's like I if you want to go see a soul, like, do you like, is that something you definitely want to like see in the future, like a proper like overhead aurora?
yeah,
You
I mean,
should.
I'm probably gonna do that once I get a better car, because bit of a life update. My car is starting to really deteriorate.
Are you getting a new car?
Yeah,
When?
next month.
Oh, you are.
I'm gonna try and get it before Thanksgiving.
Nice. The Maxima is. What's wrong with it now? I mean, I know
The
that I know.
transmission, yeah, the transmission's really getting bad. Also, the shocks are basically done for.
Gotcha. Yeah, you don't want that thing dying on the side of the highway. For those that don't
Yeah,
know, well, I guess nobody knows this besides you and me, but Connor's car has been like limping on its last leg for like a year now. And he's been
yeah.
talking about getting a new car, but he's just been like trying to see how long he can string it out.
Less on the car loan.
What's that?
I said it's less on the car loan. The more I can stretch it out and make more money.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, if you can put like a 50% down payment on it, that'd be pretty sweet.
Yeah.
Um, you know,
But yeah, that vehicle was our original Chase van. Or
yeah,
our
that was the
Chase
original. Well,
vehicle.
I mean, I guess like at the start of June 1st, when June 1st started, that was the original Chase vehicle.
Yeah.
But before that, before June 1st was a thing, I was still chasing in the Jeep,
Oh,
which was crazy. I have a few clips from that I might put up on the Patreon one day of, chasing in the Jeep that are kind of deep in the archives. But, um, it's funny too. I guess kind of moving on from the car stuff. Uh, you just got to go to Iceland, man. Iceland's so cool.
yeah.
If you want to go to Iceland, let me know. I'm down to go again.
All right.
I want. Would you go see the volcano?
Oh, I would definitely go to see the volcano. I mean, when I went to Hawaii,
Oh yeah, you
like
went.
seeing all the volcanoes. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. This is a little added context because Connor, when he was, well, how old are you? Like a toddler? Like you're pretty young.
I think it was like first grade.
Oh, okay. Uh, Connor had the biggest fear of volcanoes.
Yeah, because you traumatized me with
Well, like
having
Dante's
and
Peak.
what was it in the movie Volcano?
Oh,
Having the guy
volcano.
melt
Yeah.
in the lava and slowly
Oh,
dying
from
in
the
pain.
in the subway car or whatever.
Yeah, in the subway.
Oh
That
my
that
gosh.
guy like having the most gruesome death.
I mean, it wasn't like in the movie. It wasn't actually it wasn't gruesome, but like he just kind of like
Yeah.
fell into lava or whatever, and he was just kind of like getting absorbed by it or whatever.
Yeah, but
It traumatized
what do
him.
you think? Yeah. Horrible way to die.
Yeah, that was with Tommy Lee Jones, right? I haven't seen that movie in years.
Yeah.
It's like Tommy Lee Jones. I gotta rewatch him. I gotta rewatch. We should do like a thing where we do a stream or something where we rewatch like disaster movies. Like obviously
No, Perfect
Twisters.
Disaster
Twister.
first, and then
Oh,
disaster movies.
Perfect Disaster on Discovery.
Yes.
Oh my gosh. Speaking of, and one of the episodes was a solar storm, like a proper
Yes.
Carrington event level solar storm.
Mhm.
Which, I mean, kind of looping back, like if we were to have a Carrington level event, like
No light pollution.
light pollution, well, your cameras would end up getting cooked if it's not a film camera.
I'll be in the moment.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, I guess even yeah, because film cameras have batteries. They're not purely mechanical. Well, some of them, like really old ones, are purely mechanical. But
Bring in the 1800s one with the hood.
yeah,
So
exactly. With the little
had
black
to.
powder flash.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Oh my god.
I don't think
Yeah.
you really need a flash for an Aurora.
Yeah, no, definitely not. No, you got to do like the long exposures.
Yeah.
Well, I found that what worked best for me. So, kind of going back, I kind of looked back at some of my older Aurora photography photos and kind of saw like the improvement over the years. I was shooting on a kit lens when I first started doing it, and the kit lens doesn't have a very wide aperture. Like I think the max it would go was like f5 or something like that. But I ended up getting this past winter. I got the Sigma Art lens, that big metal lens that I got, and that one has a f-stop of 1.8, so super wide aperture, and super. And I guess they say super fast lens, but it's not referring to the shutter, which always kind of throws me off. But that lens is so crisp too, so clear. Like it's amazing how much better of an improvement you can get with a camera by just having a decent lens. It's amazing. And like my Aurora photos are like fantastic now. The ones that I got in Iceland were incredible. They're some of my favorite pictures that I've taken to date thanks to that lens. So it's like I got to get some more of these really good glass lenses for some of the videos. Like I want to do some proper documentary work soon, and I really want to get some really crisp lenses, but it's kind of hard right now when I'm not fully profiting yet off of June 1st. It's still in the building up phase. So nonetheless, we'll have to get you an Aurora, Connor.
Yeah. It'll come eventually.
Yeah, definitely. Are there any other things that we want to talk about today? I feel like we've had a pretty good podcast. This is a great
Yeah, how long have
introduction.
we gone? We've gone
I
quite
think
a
we're
while.
like 50 minutes right now.
Yeah.
I feel like this is a good way to get back into the swing of things. I think maybe we'll put the feelers out for maybe we'll do like a Q&A and some of these, like we'll get a couple of submissions even if people want that kind of thing. That'd be pretty cool.
Yeah.
If there's anything that we want to talk about, leave them in the comments below or, DM us on your preferred social media platform of choice, whether that be Blue Sky or Twitter or whatever you use nowadays. I have no idea what is going on anymore. I mean, I'm still going to be on all of them. I'm just probably not posting media as much on X with the whole weird
AI copyright.
Yeah, well, it's not only I don't really care about, well, the AI thing is, that's going to be most places, but the thing is that like the way the wording was is that the copyright, like, yeah, like all social media platforms are able to use your stuff royalty free, I guess, if you post on their site, which has always been a thing. But the thing is that there is like a wording or a clause in the new Twitter terms and services that said like, and anyone else or something like that, like anyone.
Yeah, it basically extends to everything.
Yeah, like anyone can use your thing. So if it's uploaded there, which is I don't think you can do that, but I don't know. I guess we'll see what the ramifications are of that. I feel like that's gonna be a big blow to them, and I feel like they're gonna rework something. I can't see them doing that in long term if they want to have a viable business in the future. But I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not a big tech mobile giant, so what do I know?
Also, the block feature that might actually get in some trouble with the actual app store that are out there.
Oh yeah, that's good to know.
They could just be completely like not distributed anymore unless they change that. Like they can have the Google Play and App Stores have like I guess precedent at this point to just completely shut it down.
Yeah, Elon, you should have stuck to rockets. Seriously. Oh gosh. Anywho, thanks Connor for coming back and
we're
doing this. We are so back, and I think that's going to be the episode title. Is just going to be "We're Back." Oh man, this is going to be fun. I now we got the video format of this, and then hopefully we'll be able to do some more interviews and stuff down the line as we get this thing rolling again. Hopefully not too many crazy weather stories in the future. If there's a rather boring weather week, maybe we'll just talk about some other, thoughts that we have cooking in our heads.
Yeah, or we can take call-ins from people, or
yeah, we'll figure it out.
Or like video, like or just have like people.
We'll find the format of this.
You give questions to us.
Yeah, definitely. All right, guys, thank you so much for listening to this. If we just want to plug a couple things, the YouTube is obviously the main thing at June 1st. You can find us on Twitter, Blue Sky, Instagram. The socials have been running across the top of the YouTube page here. But if you're listening to on Spotify or any of the other platforms, they will be linked in the podcast description. Give us a rating if you are so kind, like, subscribe, all the gist. We're looking forward to getting this rolling again and just having a good time with it. This is going to be a great opportunity to get Connor more in the mix again. He's going to be more than just the driver on To Hunt a Storm episodes, which, by the way, I don't know what I'm going to. I haven't made the next To Hunt a Storm yet. I've been kind of focused on other things, but I was wondering if I should just I almost kind of wanted to do a really long form, like hour-long To Hunt a Storm documentary almost from this season. But I don't know. I haven't decided what to do with it yet. I made the first episode. This year wasn't as linear as the year prior. Last year was the perfect story arc. So I might even turn that into an hour-long feature. I don't know. We'll figure it out. Anywho, thank you guys so much for watching, listening, and we'll catch you on the flip. Peace out.
Later.